We're now joined by Darren Urban, senior writer for azcardinals.com, who has covered the team for over 2 decades. Darren, you got Lance Meadow and Jeff Fiegels here on Giants.com, Big Blue Kickoff Live. Greatly appreciate the time today. Hope you and yours are safe and healthy. How's everything on your end?
Well, I am living in Arizona, so where it stands right now is not great in terms of the coronavirus, but otherwise than that, family's doing good. Everything seems to be moving forward, and keeping my fingers crossed about an NFL season.
Absolutely. I think we are all in the same boat there. So let's start with the quarterback position, Darren, and it goes without saying, Kyler Murray, very impressive last season, but he had a shortened offseason because normally rookies are preparing for the draft the entire offseason leading into the year, and then I'm sure he came into this year thinking, okay, I'm finally going to have a conventional offseason where I'll be with the coaching staff and be with my teammates, and unfortunately the coronavirus had other ideas. So how concerning is that as he enters year 2 that he still hasn't yet had a full offseason? And how much do you think maybe the continuity on offense with Cliff Kingsbury can help offset that?
To begin with, the missing offseason obviously hurts him. I mean, you had a chance to hunker down with Cliff in person and then get the work done on the field. The one good thing, obviously, that he and any player is going to have is you still had meetings. You still were meeting, talking with coaches, and Cliff Kingsbury has held all along that Kyler has shown a lot of moving forward mentally with where they were at meetings. Now, you don't get to prove it on the field, and that's an issue, but for what they were able to get done, there's been a lot of positivity there, and even Kyler said that he felt like, could he have gotten better with some on-field work during this offseason? Sure, he could have, but he feels like he did make big strides in what he was able to do virtually. And the other thing to remember with Kyler is he started every game. He was out there every game. And, having done this for so long, yes, you get something out of the offseason. I don't think there's any question about that. But nothing replaces actual regular season game experience. And he did have that. So I do feel like he's in a pretty good place considering everything he went through in 2019. And I don't think at this point there's any reason to believe that he can't make that jump that a lot of people are expecting him to make. That doesn't mean he will, but I don't think that the lack of on-field work necessarily undercuts that.
Darren, let me ask you a question. So, any time you want to have success at the quarterback position, whether you're young, old, or medium, if you will, you got to have your offensive line in front of you, there to help protect you and to get that running game going. Last year, it looked the Arizona Cardinals offense struggled a little bit at the offensive line position. He had a lot of injuries going on there, and of course that impacted his play, I think, throughout the season last year. Tell me a little bit about what you see coming up with the Cardinals offensive line play this year. Are they going to have struggles on the interior or the outside, or do you think that they'll kind of bounce back and have a good season this year?
I don't think, Jeff, there's any question that there's going to be eyeballs on that line, but I do feel like the national perspective on where this line is and where, quite frankly, it is when I look at it on a daily basis up close and personal. I don't know if they necessarily match up. Is it one of the best offensive lines in the league? No one's going to say that. I don't even think they're going to step up and say that. But some of the issues that they had last year, some of that was Kyler Murray. They did take a lot of sacks, especially earlier in the season, and a lot of that was Kyler Murray just not knowing when to throw the ball away, not knowing when to stay in the pocket, getting a little antsy as a rookie quarterback happens to do. Part of that was Cliff Kingsbury's offense. When they came into the year last year, he was insistent on doing the 4 wide kind of thing and doing a lot of the things he'd done in college. And when that didn't really work the way he wanted, and when it was understood that the personnel that he had on offense wasn't really going to fit what he wanted to do, he morphed. And they ran the ball a little bit better. They ended up averaging 5 yards a carry last year. Now, part of that was Kenyon Drake coming in, but part of that was an offensive line that got better as the season went on. And they're fortunate enough that they have a lot of continuity there. They are changing out their center. A.Q. Shipley hasn't come back, and they're going to try and Mason Cole there, a third-year guy at center, but they're going to have some stability there in terms of guys returning, and they feel like if they can stay healthy, they'll be just fine on the offensive line. Again, I don't think anybody's going to be saying that they're one of the best in the league, but I don't think they feel like it's as much of an issue as a lot of people like to say.
Darren, as far as the right tackle position is concerned, they've got Marcus Gilbert from the Steelers, but he dealt with knee injuries each of the last 2 seasons in which he went on IR, and they drafted Josh Jones, third rounder out of Houston. How do you see that position in particular playing out?
I think that's very interesting. I mean, we've already talked about the missing on-field work. That's going to kill a lot of rookies around this league, and I don't think Josh Jones at right tackle would be any different. He might have had an uphill battle getting into the starting lineup week 1 as it was, and now I think that's going to be really, really tough considering he hasn't even put on a helmet yet. And the fact that they did bring back Marcus Gilbert, who tore his ACL literally the Thursday before the regular season opener, and at that point they considered him having a fantastic camp, and he was playing really well. They put in Justin Murray, who had a lot of bumps, but did improve as the season went on, and he is back. So they have some options there. If I had to lay bet right now, I think as long as Marcus Gilbert is healthy, he's got a good chance to be the starter to begin with. But we'll kind of see where that goes. There's no question they like the future of Jones. They feel like Justin Murray could be a nice swing tackle as a reserve. They do have some things to figure out, but they do at least have some pieces to work with. It's not like there's a big donut hole there that they don't know what they're going to do.
Well, I'd like to touch on a little bit of free agent acquisition the Cardinals got this year, which I believe that, one of DeAndre Hopkins, that's quite the player to come over. And when you have Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, your 3 wide receivers, I got to believe that Kyler Murray's got to be pretty excited about throwing the ball to DeAndre Hopkins.
They clearly were in a place, with all due respect to Fitz, who is still incredibly productive as he goes into year 17, but he's not the guy he was in 2008 and 2009, and they needed a guy who could really threaten defenses, and I think that just changes the whole offense. Between that and keeping Kenyon Drake around, who again came in at midseason last year and fit so perfectly with what they were trying to do on offense and what in the backfield with Kyler Murray. So they feel like weapons-wise, they're in such a better place than they were going into last season. And obviously Hopkins is one of the best receivers in the league. It changes the whole structure of what you have at wide receiver. If you got Larry Fitzgerald still doing what he's doing, Christian Kirk, Christian Kirk's your third guy, assuming he can stay healthy. That's a pretty impressive third receiver. He's been right on the precipice of doing some nice things the last couple of years, and then he gets hurt. So they got to keep him on the field. But having those top 3 guys with Drake in the backfield, it's going to be very difficult for defenses to make decisions, whether it's, if you do some kind of zone read with Drake and could Kyler Murray keep the ball, or you have those receivers. That's a lot of things to account for at this point.
We're talking with Darren Urban, senior writer for azcardinals.com, as we look forward to the Giants-Cardinals matchup coming up in Week 14 this season at MetLife Stadium. And sticking with the wide receiver core, I think, Darren, when you look at DeAndre Hopkins' time with the Texans, he was surrounded by plenty of other wideouts. He still dominated the targets, and unfortunately those guys struggled to stay healthy. And it's interesting you brought up Christian Kirk, who also has had to deal with the injury bug in the early stages of his career. How do you see the spread of wealth perhaps playing out in the receiving core? Is Hopkins coming in now as the main guy, or do you think within Cliff Kingsbury's system they're going to use Hopkins to maybe open things up more for that young nucleus surrounding him?
I think that's a great question. I think naturally DeAndre Hopkins is going to get a lot of targets because of how good he is, but I don't think it's any kind of guarantee that all of a sudden he's going to get, 60% or 70% of them when you have all these other weapons. And I think one of the things Kyler Murray was showing last year was he doesn't necessarily fall in love with just one receiver. Early in the year last year, Larry Fitzgerald was getting a bunch of targets, and he had some really good games earlier at that point. And then Christian Kirk ended up getting a bunch of targets later. Even though he was banged up playing basically through an ankle injury all year, he ended up, I think he missed 3 games, and Fitz didn't miss any, and he still ended up with only 1 less target than Fitz. So I think there's a chance that it's going to get spread around. I think if you've got a guy like Hopkins, you don't want to forget that how good he is, and you don't want to lose sight of, getting the ball to your best players. But again, when you're in a situation where if you've got three wides on the field and Kenyon Drake and the ball is snapped in that shotgun and, Kyler Murray does a play action to Kenyon Drake, I mean, where are you going to focus on as a defense? Is it going to be Hopkins? And that's fine if it is, because then you've got, Kirk maybe going down the sidelines, or Fitz, coming underneath, or whatever it might be. And the fact that you just add somebody that the defenses has to pay attention to, that alone is going to make you better. And how it all filters out in terms of actual distribution of the ball, I think we're going to have to see how that plays out.
Well, Darren, talking about the defense, the Cardinals defense, they had a kind of a major problem last year where the Giants have had for the last 10 years, and that would be inability to cover tight ends. So, Lance, I know you're laughing at me with that because we've seen this over the years with the Giants having the same problem. But, the Cardinals went out and spent their number 8 overall pick with Isaiah Simmons, which I guess that's going to pretty much solve that problem, hopefully, because the guy is an outstanding athlete. He's all over the place. He figures to start next to Jordan Hicks. And then, what's kind of funny about this is I see that he's also listed on the depth chart that I'm looking at as the backup strong safety, which we know he can play both those positions. Tell me a little bit about what you know about Isaiah Simmons and kind of what everybody's thinking about there out in the desert about him.
Jeff, it's funny because I think one of the things that really stinks about this whole, out of the many things that stink about this whole COVID thing and the loss of the offseason is, I would have loved to been able to go out and watch a bunch of these OTAs and see exactly what they were going to do with Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk, early about, and I think this is where it's going to go. I mean, he's listed as an inside linebacker, and I don't think they want to overwhelm him with stuff. And the fact he hasn't gotten any on-field work, it shortens that time to work on that learning curve. So I don't know how many different things he's actually going to do right out of the box, because they're not going to have enough time to ramp him up. But I agree. I think he's a guy that can be the dude who covers the tight end. I think you can put him in a lot of different spaces. It gives them a lot of different options in terms of, hey, do we in some sub packages might we have 3 safeties out there with him as a safety, or might we rush him off the edge once in a while with Chandler Jones on the other side, or have him blitz from inside. I mean, they've got a lot of choices now. How it's going to work, especially the first half of the season, maybe, I think is really going to be tough to prognosticate, just because he has not even been on the field once with these guys, and he's got to learn the NFL game, and I don't think they want to overwhelm him with all these different things. He was fantastic in college about learning all these different positions on a weekly basis and doing all these things, but as we all know, trying to do that in college and doing that in the NFL level is a whole different deal.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Darren. He played 5 different positions in college at Clemson, 100 snaps at each of those positions, and it doesn't mean that that's going to transfer over. It's funny because I feel like Jeff and I are reliving all the conversations we had with Giants fans leading up to the draft, because it was the same debate, Darren, in terms of if the Giants were to take him, where would you put him, where would you play him, and if you don't have a full offseason, what would it mean? So I'm sure you pretty much dealt with similar subjects so far over the last few months.
It is funny, it seemed to me, and I was one of those people that said I was really hoping Isaiah Simmons was going to follow the Cardinals, and for a long time I didn't think there was any way that was humanly possible. But yeah, losing that offseason, I mean, with any of these rookies, like we mentioned before with the tackle Josh Jones, I mean, everybody raved about that being a 3rd-round pick for the Cardinals, and that's great, but when you take away any ability to ramp up, it really kind of undercuts what they can do, at least in this first year. And I know the one thing the Cardinals do have is, before the draft happened, they did a nice job attempting to fill all their holes on defense through free agency and that kind of stuff. So they had already signed Devondre Campbell, who was a former Falcon, to play that other inside linebacker next to Jordan Hicks, and that because they didn't know if they were going to get Isaiah Simmons. Now they're going to have to do some juggling. What do you do with Campbell? Mike Hicks, who played every snap last year, all season on defense, does he maybe come off the field once in a while so you get a little bit more athletic with Campbell and Simmons in sub packages, or does Simmons even start right away? I think they've got some options, and given where they were last year at inside linebacker, which was Jordan Hicks and then a lot of trouble, I think they'll be much happier having to make decisions on who to put on the field now.
Well, you guys also acquired, Devon Kennard, who was with the Giants. Obviously, I actually played with his father when I was with the Giants, or with the Cardinals, believe it or not. That's how long ago that was. So he's actually, he's a solid player, a guy that had 7 sacks the last couple of years. So, that's what you're going to get out of Kennard. He's a guy that's around the football, and he's a tough guy. He's a really good player. Speaking of dominant players, we must talk about Patrick Peterson. Obviously, he missed the start of the 2019 season because he was suspended. How great was it for the Giants to have him back last season, and what's his prognosis for this coming year?
Well, it was a weird year last year for Patrick Peterson because of the suspension. He didn't fit right with the defense when he first came back. He made a couple nice plays. That game in New York against the Giants was actually his first game back. He made the play at the end of the game to help seal it, and he was feeling better about it. But for the most part, he ended up playing 10 games. Those first 6 were not good. They weren't good for him, and they weren't really good, period. And there was quite frankly some concern there. But once he started working better with what Vance Joseph was trying to do, and once he kind of got his feet underneath him, the last month of the season, Patrick Peterson started looking like Patrick Peterson, and they need him. For all the changes they made on defense, and I've said this before on other platforms, this team is going to go defensively as far as Patrick Peterson and Chandler Jones play. If Chandler Jones is the pass rusher he's been the last few years, and he's been excellent, they're going to be in good shape there. And Patrick Peterson on the back end, they need him to be the guy that he's always been. And he's going into the last year of his contract, so there's a lot of motivation there.
We're talking with Darren Urban, senior writer, azcardinals.com. And Darren, I'm glad you brought up Chandler Jones, because when you look at the stats, as you mentioned, Jones has been a dominant force in terms of getting after the quarterback. I think my big question when I look at Arizona's front seven is, well, where is the sack production going to come outside of Chandler Jones? Last year they had Terrell Suggs for a little bit. He then parted ways with the team, ultimately won a Super Bowl with Kansas City. So who do you see perhaps being that complementary threat, or maybe the Robin to the Batman role that Chandler Jones is going to take on?
There's a very good chance that you're going to look at that a little bit more as committee. Obviously Jeff already mentioned Devon Kennard, who's not a guy who you're expecting to get double-digit sacks out of, but I think he can be a solid guy on the other side most of the time. And if you want to put Isaiah Simmons maybe in certain situations there to kind of come off the edge, not all the time. Obviously he's not built like a normal outside linebacker. It would have to be certain situations, but you got that opportunity. They've got Hassan Reddick, the former first-round pick, who never quite worked out at an inside linebacker, and they decided late last year to put him back outside. He's undersized, quite frankly, for that role, but he is a natural pass rusher, and he did show some flashes in some packages in that way last year. So I don't think there's any great answer in terms of who's necessarily you're going to just plop on the other side. It's not like when they had Marcus Golden on the other side from Chandler Jones. And I know there was a while there where the fan base here was really hoping Marcus would come back to Arizona and kind of be that guy. But so I think they're hoping that will help. And I think that the fact that they added Jordan Phillips inside, who had 9 sacks last year for the Bills, to maybe push the pocket on the inside, I think they're hoping that can help the pass rush in some regard.
Darren, it's interesting you brought up Marcus Golden, because he clearly is still a free agent, and the Giants gave him that unrestricted free agent tender. So July 28th is pretty much the deadline, perhaps, for him to sign with another team, or else he could very well return to the Giants. And I know he wasn't with the Cardinals last year, but you were at the Giants game. You saw he had a career year. How surprised are you that maybe there wasn't as much interest generated on the free agent market, considering how he's fought so hard upon his return from that torn ACL?
Well, I mean, full disclosure, I consider Marcus a friend. He's a good dude. I really enjoyed his time here. I hated to see him go. He's a guy that was really hoping to get a big deal here, and then the knee injury kind of messed that possibility up. And when he went out there, obviously the landscape wasn't what he was hoping for, because I know he didn't get what he wanted when he went to the Giants. And even now, I'm sure he keeps waiting for this big pass rush deal that, for whatever reason, isn't materializing. And as we've seen, there's a lot of veteran pass rushers, in fact, that aren't getting the kind of money that they were expecting this offseason. So, Marcus Golden is one of those guys. When you look at him, you look how he is physically. He's not a guy who you're ever thinking his ceiling is Chandler Jones, 20 sacks guy. But he is going to work tremendously hard. He's good in the locker room. I'm sure he's disappointed, but to me, Marcus Golden helps whatever team he's going to be on, and wherever he lands, I don't really have any question that he's going to be successful as long as he stays healthy.